Very good morning to my brothers and sisters in Turkey. And thank you, Elise. I'm sure that although I don't understand Turkish, you would have told all the good things. Nevertheless, so I have a 10 to 12 minutes of presentation in which I'm going to talk about three fundamental things. If Nidhi can put across the slides for that matter, that would be of help. While that's coming up, uh, of the three things we're talking about, one is that why we have to do business with India. The second thing is about a little bit of an understanding about automobile sector, and then the government and the regulatory support, what the Indian government provides into the automobile sector. I think I cannot see the slides. Hopefully it is coming up. But while it is coming up, let me tell you, the relationship between India and Turkey has been starting from 1500 BCE. I don't know how many people know about this. I've been given to understand that although I come from the southern part of India, one of the old kings in southern part of India has gifted a village to the Seljuk Sultanate of Ram in the 12th century. And I recognize that we have more than 30,000 people at this point in time with Turkish heritage in Tamil Nadu. That's a long relationship which went further with the Ottomans and further and further. And as of now, we stay with $13.8 billion of trade between both the countries. This engagement, we are actually working towards to see how effectively we can increase that bilateral trade relationships. If I move to the next slide, and I hold there, I'm going to talk about the first why India part of the story in the next couple of minutes time. It's a very difficult slide to talk about, but I'll try to make it quick. I want to make sure that you understand the fact in the last almost 2 decades now, India is moving through a very unprecedented transformation, obviously in a global scale, which very less countries have witnessed in the recent past. And when I say the transformation, it is about social, it is about economic, it is about political. And the most interesting thing is that all three pillars come in singularity with the objective in terms of transforming the nation. And why this is important is because we want to see economically the country doing well. We want to see socially the country is doing well, and there's a political stability. Hence, there is a possibility of both the countries working much more better. So from an Indian standpoint, if you look at one of the pillars of economy, normal measure of that one is the GDP. You all know that India today stands at $3.95 trillion of economy. Interesting part, the first trillion of India came in 67 years. The second trillion came in 8 years. The third trillion came in 5 years. And possibly the last one, which we are working on because we are close to 4 trillion, will be in less than that time, which tells you this, the pace and the scale in terms of this market is growing. A second element would be the amount of foreign direct investment which comes into the country. Because when there is foreign direct investment coming, it tells you the trust the investors has in the country. It talks about the opportunity which is there. It talks about the leadership. It talks about the access to opportunity. It talks about the delivery in that place and the possibility of making money, right? So from 1947, when we got independence, till this point, roughly India has got $950 billion of investment. Let me tell you, of that one, 532 came up in the last 100 months, which means, which you will figure out saying that the speed in terms of how things are happening. And this came from 162 countries, including Turkey. Turkey today has roughly around $210 million of investment in India. Obviously, it should go much more further. India also has around $126 million of investment in Turkey. And this came across all the 31 states and union territories, what we have, which talks about the breadth and the length in terms of this transformation which is happening from an economic standpoint. What is supporting this economic drive is the social part of the story. I'll give you one indicator about it. In the last year, we become the most and the biggest human resource provider in the world. I remember, we saying that we are second best, but I think now we are number one in India in terms of human resources. We are a 1.45 billion population. And what this gives you is that I have 1 billion people who are lesser than 35 years of age. I have my average age of 29. And more importantly, I'm going to the youngest nation till 2070. which means the productivity is expected to be at the height at least for the next 5 decades. That's the social part of the story, which means that you have a huge possibility to leverage the productivity of this nation. Uh, the economic as well as the social element both could become into a little bit of a challenge if you don't have political stability. Now, the political stability could be well measured by the election processes and things like that as an indicator. I'll give you an interesting insight around that one. We had the recent elections like the way in Turkey as well. We had around close to 1 billion people who are registered voters, around 950 million types. We have around 600 and odd million people who casted their vote. We had in 1 million polling booths for that matter. And you should be surprised to know that we had only less than 200 polling booths which went for a repoll, which means that automotive industry, which always talks about the precision in terms of Six Sigma levels, this huge activity of democracy was delivered in better than Six Sigma levels. That's the stability what we are talking about from a political standpoint. These verticals of social, economic, political activity coming to a singularity drives India to become one of the biggest opportunities in the market. And that completes my first point, saying that why foreign companies should do business in India. If I move to the second point, which is the overview of the Indian automotive business landscape, I'll request Nidhi to move to the next slide. We talk about that in 4 pointers. Nidhi, the slide is expected to come up.
Are you able to see the slide?
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. And executive summary of that one primarily says that from a market segmentation, typically people talk about 4 segments of vehicles what we have. And today I will talk about a little bit on the focusing on the two-wheelers, because this is a market where two-wheelers are significantly higher, which is dominating at a massive 75%. We have a huge projection in terms of from an industry growth standpoint, where by 2026 we are supposed to be a 300 billion opportunity. Everywhere electric vehicles are driving the conversation. India's two-wheeler and three-wheeler conversation on EVs are also leading that stuff. And we have a very low car penetration. This is an important point to know. If you look at the European markets or the US markets, where you have the global average of 314 cars per thousand, we are at a very low 24 cars per thousand, which means that even to reach a global average, we have a significant opportunity in terms of growth, which we're going to see through the next couple of decades to come. Moving forward. Slide, please. I'll talk about a little bit of a evolution of the Indian automotive sector, especially the four-wheeler part of the story. You know, in my younger days, essentially, I should be a believer of the Ford guys, wherein which there was only a few cars available, which means that there is only one color of the car available as per, and it's black, like the chairman of Ford said. But nevertheless, there is only 3 Ford. There's an Ambassador, there is a 3 Padmini, and a few others for that matter. But those all changed by 83 with Maruti coming up, which is now the biggest market player in India. And then a complete, delicensing of the activity, which brought in all the foreign market players. I'll say almost all the foreign market players in the top end to the absolute bottom available in the Indian markets. And from 2020 onwards, we see a significant shift in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler story, which means that we're seeing a graph which is actually moving towards the north, which is a phenomenal opportunity in the Indian automotive sector. And if I move forward. I'm sure the details of this one will be spoken about in the next from the next speakers who are much more better than me in the automotive sector. But from a very high level standpoint, we have a very strong production growth. You can see the numbers, 12.5 million units which are produced on an annualized basis across. And then we are talking about a record of domestic sale. I mean, this is very important to know, primarily because even in the GDP part of the story, which I mentioned before, 2 by 3rd of the demand is coming from India itself. It is demand ahead of the supply, which is a great position to be. And we have a 42 billion opportunity we are talking at this point in time, with the export growing at a 15%, which means that if Turkish companies was to come to India, join hands in India, and to work to other parts of the market, or to support the internal demand, what we have, both are absolutely phenomenal. Moving forward. telecommunications have a little bit of delays normally. And talking about the recent trends at this point in time, very high level. When we have an increased GDP, when we have a very aspirational India coming up, when we have a much more younger people who are getting more purchase capabilities with a higher purchase parity, you see more luxury vehicles coming on the roads and people buying it. And we see that one essentially one in which even the top end luxury cars are being bought in higher numbers, which is a great sign. There is an adaptability of local preferences which are required because India is something like Europe, and the whole of Europe comes together with different views and things in from Spain back to the UK the same way. One part of India will like something, some part of India will dislike something. So there is an amount of local preferences which are there, and the companies are working towards in terms of supporting the same thing. And to enhance the possibility of purchase, there is financing options which has been built by the automotive players into the whole activity itself. Although their core business is automotive, they ensure that there are financing mechanics available in terms of doing it. These are the very recent high-level trends which we see, which is all driving the conversation to make the engagement or the opportunity bigger and bigger moving forward. Okay, so some strategies when talked about, and I think there has to be some elements where you need to be careful about as well, as that's our job. So I think we see a significant investment possibility. We see innovative models coming in. We'll talk about that later. We have a growing EV trend. But at the same time, I want you to be mindful of the fact that it's a highly competitive market, which means that here the competition is in the highest extent, and you have to be there to have the strategies to manage the competition. Infrastructure currently is getting better and better. It currently still has its challenges, but it's getting better and better, which is also a great thing, but it's also a challenge. We have some regulatory hurdles which are there, which needs to, especially on the import part of the story with higher tariffs, which are still work in progress, I would sense, as per the government, but these are still available in the market, or we are faced with in that market. Now, we have a rising demand for EVs and EVs at this point in time. There are government incentives which are very, very helpful. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. There are technological advancements which are done with in-house research and development opportunities in India, which is expected and which is supported by the government. We also see some supply chain disruptions if the global, geopolitical situation turns a little bit more difficult. So essentially, those are the challenges which are currently there and the opportunities there. It's sort of a SWOT thinking. So people who are wanting to come to India should consider these as one of the key things to look into. Moving forward. I spoke about the government policies which are supporting the whole thing. I think there is a few names which are put across on full opportunities. There is something called the NATRIP establishment, which is primarily a research and development engagement in terms of a USD close to $400 million of support if you are doing research and development here and supporting the automotive production. You have an AMP program which supports the automotive engagements. We can talk about it in detail if you want to. There is a FAME scheme, which primarily, I'm sure you are aware about the faster adaptation from manufacturing part of the story, which is also driven through. There's a clean tech scheme in terms of seeing how effectively we can, it's all money budgeted and earmarked to the whole thing to see how we can make the clean tech much more better, which means that it is more green supported. There is a huge PLI, which is the production linked incentives, the volumes as when you are making it as a part of Make in India, which is supported as well. There's a flex fuel engines which are supported mixing with ethanol and other fuels which are there. That's currently in progress and currently available. Moving to 7, 8, and 9, maybe. Ethanol blending is something which the government is pushing significantly higher, and I'm sure that over the time we would see that happening. There is a policy which has been rolled out to bring it forward by 2025-26. With the EVs coming into play, we are expecting battery waste to be a menace, and there are policies to support that one, and electric mobility promotion schemes which are currently there as well. So every single policy and initiative is towards the directive of helping the situation, as we all know in all governments. Details of this could be provided. As in the interest of time, I'm moving to the next slide. Uh, the future trends, we spoke about it a little bit. Connected vehicles been the trend for the last 10 years. We see it more and more happening. We see more autonomous vehicle coming for that matter, and we know we are going to see more sustainability conversation going through. And I think we see this happening through the next 15 to 20 years is what we are currently aiming at. And moving forward, I want to come to my last slide, essentially. And this is a slide which I want to put across to you, where in which, you have people from Turkey who's wanting to come to India. And we, as the Gateway of India, would love to be a part of it to ensure that we can help you from ensuring that you want to have joint ventures, you want to have supply chain, distribution channels built in, entire value chain to support the thing we can do it. In summary, apart from Verkko as an organization supporting it, I would like to welcome you to India, because this is the country where you have to be and working through, because in the next 8,500 days, when I become 100 years old from my independence, I'll be one of the biggest markets in the world. I'll be the fastest growing economy. I'll be the fastest growing from an automobile standpoint as well. I will have 21% of the global workforce in India. I'll have 20% of the middle class in India. This is the new India, which is aspiring for, which is dreaming with you and want to grow with you. I welcome you all to the Indian market. Thank you very much.